So I just finished watching Fionna and Cake's season 1 finale, and I honestly have so many questions. Like, is this really the end of the story of Simon and Betty? What's the final status for Farm World Finn and the alternate universe versions of all our favorite characters? And is Fionna ever gonna meet Finn? We're gonna be answering all that and more in today's video, so if you're down for all that, make sure you hit the like. Now, right into the video. We start off season 1's penultimate episode, Casper and Nova, with a glimpse into a Fionna and Cake who are still encapsulated within the magic of the land of Ooh. But by the time they actually get back to their hometown, things do not appear the same way they used to be. You may have been able to argue to me that that is still the regular Gary, but that is definitely not Marshall Lee. Then we see a bunch of squirrels ripping apart LSP, and Fionna and Cake finally run back into their nasty ass apartment where they find Simon unalive in the freezer. But yeah, all that was a dream, and the portal jump from last episode actually brought them back to the ice skating ring into their regular world. But Cake is still the same, but everyone's starting to notice that Cake is still mad. So Fionna makes a cake suit and begins to check out her town to see if anything is different, but then she finds out one of her fanfics came true and tries to catch up Gary and Marshall Lee on everything that's happened. Meanwhile, we cut to see Simon in an incredibly dark dimension, standing next to the Lich before the presence of gold. And honestly, this frame right here of the Lich kneeled in prayer might be the scariest image of all Adventure Time. I know a lot of you guys in the comments on my last video thought the Lich had some kind of extra plan going on, and that he was waiting to get before the presence of Gold in order to do something, but it seems like he genuinely did get depressed, as within his prayer to Gold, he explains that after destroying all life, he no longer felt he had purpose, and now the Lich looks to Betty Gold in order to provide that. But Betty Gold instead provides the Lich with an end to his existence. It makes him one of these floating block thingies. How's that for an ending? Then, instead of getting a marriage scene and a happy reunion between our favorite couple, Simon pleads to Betty Gold that in his eyes, there is no point to his existence, and that he was trying to get back to her in order to apologize for that. And wow, man, I'm already fighting back tears this soon into the recording. Brace yourself. So in order to teach Simon a lesson, Betty Gold literally teleports him into the body of Shermie, who, in case you didn't know, is the future reincarnation of Finn and the future hero of the land of Ooh, 1,000 years after the end of the first Adventure Time series. And in the future, along with Jake's future incarnate, Beth, Simon pursues information of the Ice Crown, zeroing in on a novel about 2 sorcerers named Casper and Nova. And keep them in mind because they'll be important later. And before I forget to speak on it, the scene we get of Shermie and Beth vandalizing that entire kingdom is proof that we needed them to have their entire series alone. Make that the next Adventure Time spinoff, please. Oh yeah, and while all that's going on, Simon's real body is kind of just tripping out in front of Betty Gold next to the Scarab. Keep in mind, the Scarab is still trying to clap Simon's body so he can get rid of the unauthorized universe of Fionna and Cake. But you already know Betty Gold wasn't having all that. So instead, she starts splitting up the Scarab into a whole bunch of tiny different pieces, and in order to escape her wrath, he jumps into Simon's head. Pause. Then once the Scarab makes it into Fionna and Cake's universe, he immediately begins wreaking havoc. So in an attempt to stop him from merging back into one giant being, Fionna and her friends start bottling up all the baby Scarabs. They even manage to take his shiny crystal thingy. And we cut back to Simon as Shermie with Beth as they read through the interactive Casper and Nova novel, and it becomes quickly apparent that this story of 2 sorcerers in search of the Ice Crown was intended by Gold Betty to parallel the message and story of Betty and Simon, as originally Simon was only brought to madness by his pursuit of the crown, which we all know eventually led to the self-sacrifice of both characters, to which Betty chose to make her sacrifice out of love, which adds a multi-layered degree of complexity to my assessment of Simon and Betty's relationship, as one cannot deny that no matter how much they love each other, a relationship that does not consider the well-being of everyone involved will inevitably become toxic. Then back in Fionna and Cake realm, we see Fionna and her friends cleaning up her stank-ass room and very stupidly leaving LSP in the same room as all the bottled up Scarab, resulting in the Scarab getting back to his full power, destroying Fiona's apartment, and lingering over our favorite characters with a deadly stare as he prepares to annihilate them. And that masterpiece was episode 9, Casper and Nova. And honestly, there's almost too much that can be said about it. There's a lot of analysis here, but let me start by saying I love the way this episode starts to set up the ending of each of our characters' arc. You can see a complete 180 from the Fionna we met in the first few episodes, who is very fed up with her reality and how mundane her world is, to the Fionna we have at the end of the season, who upon finally arriving back to her home universe is much more worried about maintaining the lives, friends, and family that she has here. This show has definitely delved a lot into how the mental health of our main characters like Fionna and Simon is directly impacted by their sense of belonging or meaning. And after all the traumatizing events and destruction she unintentionally brought to all these other characters home, it honestly felt really fulfilling and like a full circle moment to see Fionna genuinely want to fight for her original home. I also can say I was not left disappointed by Simon's interactions with Gold Betty. If anything, Simon definitely deserved the opportunity to say his final words to her. I mean, they both deserved that. And seeing how Betty Gold interacts with Simon while she's a god was terrifyingly interesting, to say the least. This episode also gave us much more understanding of Gold Betty's power and how nigh limitless it must be, considering it could transfer Simon's consciousness with the future incarnate of another person and can one-shot embodiments of concepts like the Lich. And speaking of that, we finally have a proper ending for for this character. I know in the main series, Finn had a final standoff against his hand, and the Lich eventually became Sweet Pea. But to see that extremely menacing version that wore Billy's skin all those years ago finally get the karma that he deserved was way more satisfying than I could have imagined it to be. And speaking of satisfying conclusions, we received the best one in Adventure Time serialization thus far, through the season's 10th and final episode, Cheers, which we start off with a glimpse of our titular characters from last episode, Casper and Nova, as Simon continues to play through them like a telltale game while within Shermie's body. Meanwhile, Shermie's inside his own mind just chilling playing video games. Then we cut back to Fionna world in the Scarab, and he is pretty ticked. He tells him to give him his crystal back, but instead Cake poops it out and ends up freeing all the multiversal criminals trapped inside. And they all try to jump the Scarab, but he fights back pretty quickly, and the Scarab ends up pretty much kicking the crap out of everybody. And once he has a hold of his crystal, we see him literally start to erase Fiona's entire universe from existence, piece by piece. But Cake isn't really going for all that, so she turns into Gojira. Then Simon accidentally gets the middest ending to the Casper Nova game, and Simon ends up realizing the reason that him and Betty are in this position is because he allowed her to sacrifice herself for him time and time again. And he begins to wonder what would have happened if he would have just helped her follow her dreams instead. But Betty tells him she wouldn't have it be any different, and thanks him for the experience before the two part ways. And is this the ending I wanted for my favorite couple in the series? Absolutely not. I believe both Simon and Betty deserve each other. But I do agree with the message of not promoting the idea of self-sacrifice and teaching all the viewers that the only person you ever truthfully have to live for is yourself. And we cannot make saving others the meaning of our lives, because we all as individuals matter too. So I definitely do understand why the series had to take this direction with this story. But before parting, Bo Betty grants Simon's final request of removing the burden on his mind of Fionna and Cake's universe, granting it to him in the form of a dandelion that he gifts directly to Fionna through his head. And after reminding Simon that his life will have meaning regardless of whether or not she's around, Simon and Betty say goodbye to each other for the final time. Meanwhile, right before the Scarab can completely clap Fiona's universe, Fionna makes a wish that canonizes her universe and makes it an authorized part of the Adventure Time multiverse, which immediately undoes all the destruction done by the Scarab, and Prismo finally breaks free. The Scarab gets butthurt and starts throwing a temper tantrum to destroy the universe anyway, so Fionna turns into way big and ends up beating that ass. And this scene with her using Cake as a giant hammer is all the reason we need for us to have a season 2. Then the Scarab ends up getting clapped by the peppermint tank from the vampire universe, and out pops baby Finn, who somehow survived the apocalypse world he was left in the episode The Star. And we see Farm World Finn's son Jake and little Destiny, but no word on the status of Farm World Finn whatsoever. Then the Scarab ends up getting egged by Cake, and all of our beloved characters gather from around the town to celebrate the fact that they're canon now. And little Destiny and Jake ask to stay in Fiona's world since they have working toilets. We are then given one more final extremely beautiful montage showing Fionna and all her friends rebuilding their world, along with Simon as he readjusts to life, now knowing that the only life he needs to validate his meaning is his own. And we are actually able to see our characters achieve some form of happiness and peace. Even the Scarab, who is now working, sweeping the floors for Prismo as punishment for his crime. But Prismo's a cool guy, so he decides to be friendly and teach the Scarab how to build universes. We then end the episode with Simon talking to Finn's mom, Minerva, about how he will always be on the journey to find meaning in his life. He is human after all. And we end the season with Fionna planting new life in her garden next to Hunter, now thankful for the life she has in her own universe. And if that isn't the most satisfying conclusion in all Cartoon Network history, then I genuinely have no idea what else would be. No idea how they managed to do it, but they somehow gave us a happy ending. I personally am beyond satisfied with it. I really do wish there was another conclusion that could have came to the end of the story of Simon and Betty, but I completely love, respect, and appreciate the message behind it. I understand exactly why it had to happen. Overall, when it comes to the arc of Fionna authorizing her home universe, I do really appreciate the fact that in a bittersweet way, everyone was able to get what they wanted. We even see Jake and little Destiny adjusting to new life in this universe, going on a date in the library, and it is really cute. However, here's what I don't like about that though. We never receive an exact confirmation on what happened to Farm World Finn. So I do have to assume that he isn't alive anymore. And if that is the case, who's gonna take care of all Jake's other siblings? And what happened to the vampire universe's version of Princess Bubblegum and Marcel? And most disappointing of all, we still never see Fionna interact with the main timeline Finn. I think all those little pieces of fan service are more than enough reason for them to eventually end up making a season 2 for all of us. I think the season 1 finale definitely wraps everything up nicely, but it leaves the door open for them to do a season 2 if it's popular enough for them to do so in the future. But that was a flawless finale regardless. That was my overall analysis for the final 2 episodes of season 1 of Fionna and Cake. Make sure you let the creators know you want there to be a season 2 by leaving a like on this video, subscribing to the channel, and leave a comment telling me what your favorite episode of the season was. Thank you for watching. I love you. I appreciate you all. Sun God signing off.
I come in clutch like a genie. Don't talk unless you need me. You talk too much, you need it. All of my bitches look like models, she in love with me. When we link, it's flashing lights and cameras, got a blammer.